Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before we get to our guests here, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Kimberly Rieck on the podcast. She's an IFBB Pro Women's Physique Division. She's also coming to us all the way from the state of Colorado, but she's a Nebraska girl, so that's one of the reasons why I had to have her on. Go Big Red as a Cornhusker football fan myself, but most importantly, she's our current guest. Kimberly, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you give us, well, first of all, before you give us your backstory, what's the weather like in Colorado today?
Today is actually kind of cooler. I think it was like in the 80s, a little sunny, just a normal Colorado day for once, not steaming hot.
I was gonna say the same thing here. Like it's a little bit cooler. This is perfect weather for someone with my skin tone because it's all cloudy outside, so you don't have to worry about going outside and just getting absolutely marred. So yeah, it's an ideal day. But before I embarrass everyone with my skin woes, why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to you deciding to become a bodybuilder?
So I have always been in athletics. I started playing soccer when I was 5, softball, basketball, volleyball, traveling all over the state of Nebraska as a kid. And I started lifting weights with my best friend. Her dad was actually the varsity football coach and weight training at our high school. So at about age 12, we were in the weight room, like doing squats, doing lat pull downs, anything. And all I cared about when I was that age was I wanted to play in the World Cup. So I was doing anything I could to make my athleticism better, stronger, faster, whatever I could do. Um, all through high school, kept lifting, all through college. Um, I decided not to play soccer. I'd gone on a lot of visits, either didn't like the school, didn't like the team. And so I was just like, you know what, let's just focus on a career. I can always keep playing soccer. So that's what I did. And I really stopped lifting and started running. I had these massive quads and I was like, okay, I'm done with these soccer legs. So let's just run and just stay in shape. But I don't need the muscle and the strength and anything anymore. And a few years later, I had always thought about bodybuilding and I always loved the appearance of muscles and whatever. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. So I was doing my own diets. I was training, following all the workouts that I could possibly do to get my muscles back. And I was unsuccessful. I called myself skinny fat. So I finally gave in and hired a trainer. And at the time, I was doing a paleo diet. So I knew that I could diet and I could follow a meal plan. And um, I just needed the training and the nutrition, just a little bit more help. So I went to my trainer and they ended up giving me more food. I wasn't eating enough. And within 4 weeks, they're like, yes, we're going to put you on a show because your muscle memory came right back. You're excelling in everything that we've done for you. So we can nail this. And I did my first show in 2013. I did figure and physique. I did both categories. I ended up winning everything. I won all my classes as novice and in the opens. And then I won all the overalls for both figure and physique too. So, I mean, if you're going to win basically 7 different categories in your first show, you're kind of addicted to winning at that point. And so that's how it all got started. And I haven't really backed off since.
That's amazing. Figure and physique. That's the first time that we've heard someone who's won both divisions. Usually it's some person who goes and competes in, bikini or figure and physique, and then they win one of them and they're like, oh, this is where I know what I want to do. But since you won both of those, what made you lean more towards the physique aspect as opposed to staying in figure?
Well, you put in so much work and so much time getting ready for these shows. It's like, how much time are you spending on stage when you're doing figure? Maybe 2 minutes total. On physique, you get a little bit more posing. You don't have to wear those stupid high heels. And it's more, a little bit more on the athletic side, which is more me. Like, I like to do the posing and all that other stuff. And so that's why I chose physique.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that because one of the questions that I like to ask all the figure and bikini girls is, what that experience is like with those high heels because, yeah, that cannot be. I mean, I always say, don't those people already go through enough as it is, and you already got to make them walk out there in those high heels. I mean, yeah, anything to get out of that. I mean, I would be more than happy to do personally myself. But I always love to ask for all of my health and fitness guests. I mean, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape. Whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they did, what exercises they did. So many little things add up to the overall package that people end up seeing. And I think it's just interesting that most people don't realize that because a lot of people just associate, if you work out, it'll just naturally come to you, but it just takes so much more than that. And I always say, if you were to walk up to someone and say, like, what did you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you. What was that experience like for you, sort of figuring out what worked best for your body specifically?
It's still a learning process, honestly. Like, there's so much more new equipment making things more ergonomic, maybe being able to isolate more into what you're trying to train. Like my problem right now, for example, is getting my lats to activate. And so I've found some new equipment. My coach is giving me new exercises and basically different angles, how to isolate that and actually get them to contract and do the work that they need to do.
No, yeah, I totally understand that struggle because there's just so many different things for so many different people that they really struggle with, which leads me perfectly into my next question because everyone's genetics are different. And when anyone gets started in the gym, I mean, they're going to have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then they're also going to have that one body part that, I mean, just really lags behind that they just have to train to overdrive to get to catch up to everything else. I'll give you my examples first. I mean, for me, my back, just because I had jobs all throughout college of, where I was lifting and loading stuff into trucks and warehouses. I mean, you either got a really nice back or you quit. Those were basically the two options. But I'm also 6'3", so I mean, my lower body and my legs are just shot. Where I mean, I have to train them into overdrive just to get them to look like any semblance that I train them at all. I mean, there's still that joke when I go in the gym. Some of my friends will be like, "Hey, Ryan, you ever plan on training legs anytime this year?" And then I'll just be like, "Oh yeah, you guys are real funny." I mean, I still train them 2 times a week. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
So obviously, like we've kind of already touched base on, I've always had very good legs from playing soccer for so long, and that's always my favorite question when people ask me like, "What do you do to train legs?" And I said, "Well, first start out playing soccer for 29 years, and then we can go from there." But yeah, legs have always been very very easy for me. My hardest again was always my back. Like it took a lot of work to get my back to come up. I mean, just the sports that I played were never really upper body, so I still struggle with my back.
I always say it's almost the exact opposite every single time for the guests that we have on. I'd say about like 75% of the time. And I'm going to reveal something that I haven't revealed yet on this podcast. I was the kicker on my high school football team too. So, and I didn't even have legs. So I don't know how genetically like that's possible. Like I could kick a football really far, but like I didn't have the legs to show it. I mean, again, it's just one of those weird freaky things. And I always said, like calves are probably my biggest pet peeve were just because, I mean, that is the one thing where in my opinion, I mean, it is so genetic. I mean, you can work them out, but it's very, very hard to grow calves unless you're just genetically built for that. I always said you could inject pure muscle into my calves and they wouldn't even grow an ounce. But one of the myths and stereotypes that I love to bust on this podcast, I mean, we discussed it briefly before we started this podcast, is that it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there are just still so many women that have that fear where if they walk into the gym and touch one weight, they do anything with body weight exercises, anything other than cardio basically, they're just going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And they don't want that. And I always say to that, I mean, it's like you'd be the luckiest person on the planet. Everybody would want to first of all talk to you. I mean, it is just so not true. Obviously you got started at an early age, so you might not have had that fear, but obviously now you probably still get that all the time where people come up to you and they have that fear. How do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I still get that. I have a lot of clients that I work with, and they are just scared to death that they're going to get too big. And I was like, trust me. I started out, my stage weight, my very first show was 124 pounds. I just competed in my second pro show in Tampa last weekend, and my stage weight was 144. That's 20 pounds difference in 7 years. So, I mean, nothing happens overnight. It takes every ounce of dedication and 100% of your diet, 100% of training, everything to even put on any muscle. And the only thing you're going to do when you're starting out lifting weights, I tell people, females, is that you're increasing your metabolism and you're going to burn fat. So they need to look at it that way and not that they're going to grow muscles because muscles do not grow on trees.
And yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And again, if that does happen to you though, give me a call. I mean, I'll be waiting for that person, So, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It just takes so much time and dedication that a lot of people just don't realize or they take for granted, which is why I love to bring that question up because it's just so not true. But leading on that question, one of the many things that I think benefits women so much more than it does guys when they go to the gym and start working out is just the confidence boost that it gives you. I mean, we've heard so many stories on this podcast of so many women that, have made life-changing decisions or just really helped them with their overall happiness and their overall drive in life. How has that confidence boost affected you, and how have you been able to use that to impact other aspects of your life?
I mean, I've always been a very humble person. So the confidence has always kind of been there, but it's just knowing that I feel better about myself. Like, just the energy is there, that my mood is better. It's not necessarily just confidence, it's just an overall feeling of well being and happiness.
I couldn't agree more. It's just such a great positivity boost. And I mean, especially if you're having a bad day and you go to the gym and you just get that little workout in, I mean, it just can be such an overall day changer. But you were talking a little bit about nutrition earlier. What would you say is probably the biggest nutritional change that you had to make to your diet when you started really getting into this lifestyle?
When I first started, the biggest changes for me was I wasn't eating enough. And the second change, the hardest part was eating foods, whole foods, nothing with labels. Like, because I was stuck in that thing, which a lot of people do. It's like you read a label, it says low fat. Oh, that's healthy for me. Oh, it's low carb. Oh, that's healthy for me. But that's a huge misconception that just because it's low fat, low sugar, or gluten free, that doesn't necessarily mean that what is in that nutrient wise is good for you. And that was the hardest thing to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you all the stories that I've heard about, people that have struggled with that specifically when they've gotten started. But that also leads me into, I mean, 95% of the general public would not be able to go on a prep just because to be able to get into shape to go on a prep takes so much hard work, dedication, and determination that so many people wouldn't be able to do that. To add on also to the nutrition that has to happen. I mean, the nutrition alone 90% of the people would not be willing to go and do that because I mean for so many people that are just so used to the fast food lifestyle that a lot of people enjoy these days. But what was that experience like for you going on to your preps, and how has that evolved since your career has gone on? Has preps gotten easier for you, or in some cases for some guests that we've had on it's gotten harder? What has been that experience like for you?
Every year I think my prep's going to be easier, and it's not ever. I had a lot of personal issues go on this year, which I mean, we started prep in January, and we were getting ready for to do a show in Omaha actually in June, and my body just kind of fought back on everything the first couple of weeks, and just kept getting worse and worse. So I had to back off on all my training, which really was just like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Like, I'm not gonna be ready for the show in time. Then my body started responding again. I do work full time. I do ultrasounds. I ended up getting an arm injury from work. And so, about 7 weeks out from the show, I was completely restricted, couldn't do any upper body training. And that was from my doctor, wouldn't let me do anything. So, for 2 weeks, I was training legs 3 times a week. Um, so finally, again, we got better, was able to train again, and we're making good progress. And then my coach actually died. So, I mean, talk about like an emotional whirlwind when you think everything is finally falling into place and you've got 5 weeks to get to the show, and then you're just hit with the most devastating news ever. Um, so then I switched to another coach who was actually friends with my old coach, and we did as much as we could getting ready. We ended up skipping that first Omaha show and going into Chicago instead. And I had decided that with my last coach basically a couple of days before he had passed away, and just to give myself more time since we'd hit so many roadblocks. But just, I mean, I was so proud of myself to make it to the show in Chicago, just of overcoming everything that I had done and still continuing on the prep. And I just know that there's so many people that don't have that drive and determination that would have given up and thrown in the towel and just said, you know what, this is too much. But I've always had that perseverance to overcome the challenges. It's like if I'm being challenged, then I'm going to show what's up and get it done.
That's just so inspiring. It's like, wow, that is probably one of the hardest preps that I've ever heard about. I mean, just going through all that and still going on there. Yeah, that is like I always say, for so many of these people, just getting on stage, that's an achievement in and of itself. But for that prep, I mean, that is just so great that you were able to still, go step on stage. And I mean, that's just such a great thing to hear. But I mean, part of these preps that I think a lot of people don't understand, and one of the things that I was really shocked by, that is the hardest thing for so many of our guests that we have on, the vast majority, I should say, is the posing. I mean, I always say now, I mean, you can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's sort of like being a great driver, where you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. Posing is ever evolving. I mean, you can never get it nailed down perfectly. You always have to stay on top of it. What has your experience with posing been like?
That is, you couldn't have said it better. It's always going to be evolving as you're going through prep. Like you need to practice it basically from the beginning to the end, all the way through. But as your body changes and you're seeing different definitions and striations and whatever, you're going to have to tweak your poses to show your best physique. Like you're showing the best aesthetics, your lines, your anything. So if you're not adjusting your posing to display that, the judges don't see it. And so therefore you're making yourself not the best that they need to see.
No, it's just, I mean, I always say with the posing aspect, it's just so hard for so many people just to get that down, because I cannot tell you how many times we've heard stories of people who, oh yeah, I decided, start posing 2 weeks before my show, or I just started, late. And it's like, good luck with that, because a lot of people just underestimate the value that posing has. But what is out of your physique poses, I should say, what is your favorite pose to do, and what is your least favorite pose?
My favorite has always been the front double bicep, just because I feel like my lines just look so good in that pose. And my least favorite pose is still my ab pose. Like I have a very hard time contracting my ab muscles, so I always hit an oblique ab shot instead because it's easier for me. But I will keep practicing, and hopefully I'll get it one of these days.
I always say, yeah, the ab pose is just such a weird pose, because I mean, you just don't look normal. I mean, it just doesn't look right. It just seems that's one of the most forced poses, I think, when it comes to the appeal look to it. So yeah, I definitely think if they could find some way to, make it look, a little bit more natural than sort of like most of all the other poses that they have you do. But another thing with posing that a lot of people don't understand too is, I mean, some of these posing sessions that the competitors go through, I mean, you're going to be more sore than most of your workouts. And we always hear, the day after the show, a lot of people are more sore than they've ever been in their life, just because the human body is not designed to be, in a flex position that long. How do you deal with that? Does that just come with the practice, where it becomes easier to sort of hold those poses? Because we've had some guests where, if you have a last name, first of all, that starts with like an A or a B, you're SOL when it comes to a physique show, especially during call outs, because you might have to, be in those mandatory poses. You might just have to be in a flex state for, 45 minutes to, an hour if there's a lot of competitors at the show. What has that experience been like? Is it just the conditioning part that just becomes easier as time goes on?
Yeah, you definitely like can condition your posing so you can hold it better. And you'll see a lot of competitors up there just shaking away when they're in their posing. And that's a little bit of conditioning. And then that's a little bit of just being depleted and no water and all that other stuff. The other hard thing is a lot of people, when you get below a certain body fat, you start cramping. I get cramping in my left foot all the time. And so to be cramping and trying to pose at the same time is always really hard. So you really hope that doesn't happen while you're on stage. But what I found that helps a lot for the conditioning part of your posing is when I'm training, let's say, for instance, I'm training my back workout after I'm doing lat pull downs or whatever, I will do a couple back double bicep poses just to like condition a little bit harder and get that squeezing motion in there and contracting. But yeah, those judges will run you through those mandatory poses a lot of times if they can't make up their minds. So you're going to be up there a long time.
Which, I mean, that would inspire me to train even more just so that I don't have to keep being on there the whole time. I mean, just to be that much better than the person so that they don't have to, have you keep going. But going off tangent a little bit, one of the training techniques that I think a lot of people that I have on just swear by is time under tension when they work out. Do you use that a lot, or what are some of the specific types of training that you like to use to help with your muscle growth and just help with off season and just maintaining this look, especially going on preps?
So recently I just started doing blood flow restriction training. I've been going to a therapy place that has a medical grade blood flow restriction training, so you're not just cinching up bungees, but that has been awesome. Like it helps with um, your muscle growth and with recovery. It's been amazing. But in my regular training, I do a lot of time under tension, but more in the eccentric motions. And that has made me so sore. And it's just been a different method of training that I haven't done. And I've really enjoyed it so far.
When you're talking about the first thing, the thing with the blood, is that where they tie up your arm kind of like in a band and then make sure that like all the blood then goes to it's like I remember there were some guys in high school that would like try that where they tie like a rubber band super tight and then they'd be like, "Oh, look at all my veins are popping" or whatever, and I'd be like, "Well, yeah, take the bands off and then we'll see how big." But yeah, is that sort of what that is?
Yeah, so that's concept is that you're restricting blood to the extremity that you're trying to train. So what I do is they actually use blood pressure cuffs, so they know what type of compression that you're actually using when you're training these things, and it's not a lot. Like I don't even use more than like 5 pound weights when I'm doing my arms, and I do leg extensions and hamstring curls with the ones on my legs, and still 45 pounds, and I am toast. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, I was gonna say it just that's the first time that we've had someone come on and say that like they openly practice that because I mean I think a lot of people do, but it's just like one of those things where they just it's not that big of a deal for so many people. But yeah, it can really be a huge difference maker. I've heard that I've gone on and looked at some of these people's results on Instagram, and some people do talk about that. So yeah, if anyone wants to go and check that out, I highly recommend looking that up. But going back to these competitions, I mean, as you can see, I'm one of the palest people that you'll ever meet in your entire life. I mean, my thick Norwegian roots. I mean, I can't go outside without an SPF of 1 million if the sun is out. I mean, I was at a Twins game recently, and I got burnt to an absolute crisp. Even though I had shade seats, I was just out in the sun for about half an hour, and yesterday I was still peeling off basically the last amount of skin that was burnt from that. But bodybuilders get tan. What is that experience like for you when you get to put that tan on? You get to see all those changes that really happen. I mean, all you get to see muscles that you never even knew that you had. A lot of times, everything really seems to pop out. What is that feeling like for you when you get to see that finished product and you see everything really beefed up, basically?
It's actually awesome. Like, I don't know, I it's hard to explain. The whole purpose of the tan is you want to be dark enough so the stage lights don't wash you out. So the judges can see your definition, but obviously it's cool as soon as you get it done, you can see all the definitions, all the striations, and all the work that you put in the last 12, 16, 20 weeks, depending on how long you prepped. And it's just an awesome feeling to be like, yes, we got this. This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine what that feeling must be like. But another thing with, putting on that is that, you can't really sit on anything. You can't really lean up against anything. I mean, we hear so many stories, you got to bring your own bed sheets to the hotel room. I mean, that's another thing that, I mean, if we were to make a checklist of all the things that these competitors have to go through, I mean, just another check off the list right there. But a question that I ask all of my guests, whether they be, my bands and musicians or my health and fitness guests from my bands, I always like to ask, what is that feeling like when you get to go up on stage and perform live in front of hundreds of thousands of people from my bands? But that also applies to the bodybuilders. What is that like for you when you get to walk up on stage and show off all of that hard work that you've worked on for months upon months?
It's a phenomenal feeling, honestly. Everybody always asks if I get nervous, but it's like there's nothing to be nervous about. Like you are just getting up there and showing off. And I've been a person that's never liked attention. I've always been really humble. So it's such a awkward feeling almost that I'm excited to get up there and just be like, look at me, look at me, look at me.
No, and I just can't even imagine what that feeling is like. But when you're on stage, does time really seem to fly by, or does it seem to stand still, or is it sort of a combination?
You know what? It flashes. I don't remember anything as soon as I get off stage. It just blows by so fast, and that's why it's so important to practice your posing, is because you got to be able to have it like down pat, get through it, and you're off stage, and then I don't remember what even happened.
I know. I always say, like my bands, they can be on stage for, any upwards to almost like 2 hours. But these competitors who've worked, arguably even harder and even longer, I mean, they're only on stage for some of them for, especially if you're like a bikini or a figure for maybe a minute at most. And it's just, that just shows to just that dedication that they have to the sport if they're willing to go through all of that just for that little spot on the stage. But I always love to ask this to my pros that I have on here. What was that experience like for you when you won your pro card? Because for so many people out there, I'll just explain real quick. Winning your pro card is a lot for a lot of people. That is their shining moment in bodybuilding, just because that is the affirmation that, I mean, all of that hard work that they put into the gym has really paid off, and they're a pro now, and they can compete at their pro shows. What was that feeling like for you when they announced your name and you realized that you're a pro now?
It was seriously one of the best moments of my life. Something I had been working for 7 years, and just like a surreal moment almost. But it was like I had just had the best feeling going into the show when I turned pro that this was my time. It was finally going to happen, and but for it to just to finally hear my name being called at first place, and then I won new IFBB Pro was just amazing. Dream come true for sure.
I mean, I just can't even imagine what that feeling must be like, and just that's just so great to hear. But now we go on to a fun question. What is your go-to post-show meal?
You know what? I don't ever really get too fixated on what I eat after the show because I've had so many times where it's like, I really want to eat this. And I've been thinking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the show gets over at 10 o'clock and that place isn't open. And you're just let down because you can't eat it. And so, you know what? I just, wherever we can go and it's good food, I'll be happy. So my last post show meal was chicken and waffles, and it was amazing.
That sounds unbelievable. Yeah. Way to go. Now you got me drooling basically just thinking about that. But I always said if I ever competed, I would just go to a Five Guys, which is like $1,000, and just be like, hey, I'm buying you out for the night. I mean, I'm either gonna pass out, die, or throw up, but either way, I'm getting my money's worth. But probably the most important question that I love to ask on this podcast, because it's another myth and misconception that a lot of people have, and I still get to this day. I mean, I'll get people coming up to me, some of my friends that watch the podcast, and they'll be like, hey, it's great what you're doing, but I'm just shocked that a lot of these bodybuilders that you have on, I mean, they're not able to maintain that look 24/7. So many people, I think, don't realize that look is not sustainable. And I mean, I just love to ask this question because I think, especially with Instagram, sometimes people, they don't tend to post a lot of their, off-season pics, which I can totally understand because, I mean, if you're trying to motivate people, I mean, posting some off-season pics, I mean, might not really be that much of an inspiration for so many people, but just a lot of people have that myth ingrained in them. So when they start to, get in shape, they don't realize that there can, be aftershocks where, you might not be able to, keep this steady climb up the hill. Basically, you might have to fall down every once in a while. I always like to compare it to, like the shows that they have, like The Biggest Loser, where you see people, they lose, like 150 pounds, and sometimes they're able to keep that weight off. And a lot of people, I think, watch that, and then they might think that that same goes to bodybuilding, where, I mean, if you work your butt off for a prep, you might be able to maintain that look, 24/7 because you've worked just so hard for it. And I mean, some people do try to maintain that look, but I mean, it can shorten your career, and it's not healthy to be at that low body fat percentage for an extended period of time. But what has that experience been like for you? Because we have so many people that they come on and they talk about how, they might get, anxious, or they might just get, just not depressed, but just sad, and just really hard to come to grips with the fact that, I mean, you're not going to be able to maintain that look that you present on stage 24/7.
Yeah, I know a lot of people get what's called body dysmorphia when they come out of prep, but if you do things correctly when you're coming out of prep, which is what I'm working really hard to do right now, is you can maintain a lean look, but still keep your metabolism healthy. And actually, you have to have a certain body fat percentage in order to be able to grow. So if you need to put on muscle and you need to grow and make improvements, you're gonna have to sacrifice a little bit of leanness in order for that to happen. And if you're a competitor and that's your goal is to improve and to be better for next year, and you understand that, it makes it so much easier. I have had off seasons where I've gotten a little out of control. I've gotten bigger than I wanted to, but you know what? Like, I also put on a lot of muscle mass, and so that it's still, even though it's hard and you don't feel comfortable with how you look, you know you're doing your best and you're making improvements. And it just is not healthy to continue to stay at a lean body composition. I think I was roughly under 5 this last show. It's hard to say. No matter the tool that you use, you're always going to get a different number. But like, I wasn't sleeping. I was maybe sleeping 2, 3 hours a night every night for the last couple of weeks leading up to this show. Is just because my body's not functioning like it should properly. Like, it's not. You're in a caloric deficit, and so you're not happy. And sleep is the most important recovery. And so to think that I even wanted to stay like that was like, no, I need to sleep. So let's get back on board.
I mean, I always like to compare it to starting a business where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle too, first of all. I mean, that's just so important. But you brought up the next topic. I mean, almost like Nostradamus. I mean, you had it completely down where I always love to ask too, because like you said, the number one recovery is sleep. And I mean, that's just such an important thing that some people don't realize. I mean, I always say I had the number one sleep specialist on the planet on the podcast. He called all the way from Oxford. And first of all, he had one of those posh British accents where, I mean, it was just the greatest thing ever. That was just like I told you with the Australians, where I basically told them, I was like, you're just going to talk the entire time and I'm just going to listen because it's like literally like pouring chocolate down my ear. I mean, it was just the smoothest accent. And I just felt like I gained 10 IQ points just from listening to him talk. But we were talking about, the importance of sleep. And obviously, it can be hard, like you said, getting the 2 to 3 hours when you're on prep. How are you able to function off of 2 to 3 hours of sleep? Because with me, I mean, let's be honest, I get unbelievably cranky if I get anything less than basically 5.5 to 6 hours. And I almost cannot work out just because I'm one of those people where I need to get my proper amount of sleep. How are you able to function with that such low levels of sleep? Is it just that drive and that determination that you have deep down that really just pulls you through?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it was rough. And I kept telling everybody, it's like, I can diet, I can deal with being hungry, I can train, I can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do my cardio. But when I'm tired, I'm I am not okay. And I definitely am a 7, 8 hours of sleep type of person. And so anything less than 6 is pushing it. And so those last 3 weeks were rough, really, really rough. And it's like you question, like, why am I doing this? And then you kind of have to remind yourself, like, yeah, the goal is right there. Like, that finish line is right there, but we can get it done.
How long after your show do you think it takes for you to go back into a healthy sleep schedule?
Oh my gosh, it was like the next day. That cheat meal after the show, slept like a baby. It was nice.
Okay, I was gonna say that's good because yeah, as long as you're able to get that, because yeah, I mean, that's such an important thing that a lot of people don't talk about. But now, two of my favorite questions to ask on this podcast that I ask all my health and fitness guests. For the first one, I mean, so many positive things have happened to me, since I started really working out in college, getting bigger and stronger. But one of the negatives is that you're gonna get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars. I mean, no matter how tight or bottles of water or anything that's sealed on tight, oh, we'll get the muscles over here. My mom always says, Ryan, come over here, big strong man, come over here and help open this. I mean, I just find that so fascinating. But has that been a similar experience for you, especially when you're on your prep and you looking the way that you look now? Do a lot of people just assume that you can do favors for them?
um, yeah and no.
Okay.
I think the people that know me well enough know that once I get to a certain point, the favors are off. And anything extracurricular beyond my prep is not going to happen. But there are a lot of those people that are, hey, can I take a picture with you? Will you flex for me? Will you do this? Which is humbling, but no.
Well, yeah, I always say, I mean, when you're in your prep, you're kind of basically like a human art exhibit where people just find, I mean, just walking down the street dressed like you are right now, I mean, people would probably just be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I haven't seen that before. So that can take I mean, that can just be really a big adjustment. But how do you feel that you have adjusted to that, knowing that, I mean, if you do go out, a lot of times you might get stares and, you might be a little bit abstract from the norm. So people might be a little bit more curious.
Yeah, at first it was really hard. Like, I didn't appreciate it at all, and like I was almost offended. But recently, in the last few years, like I'm just kind of oblivious to anything that's really going on around me because I know it happens, and so I just have this tunnel vision and just don't really pay attention. Like people will actually like come up to me and make comments, and then I'm just like, whatever, or ask to take pictures. And I've always been, no, I'm not taking pictures with anybody unless it's like a little kid or
Yep.
somebody that's like, I don't know, like I always want to uphold the professionalism of myself in the sport, but also then again, I don't like being like the circus freak either.
No, yeah, I can totally understand that. I mean, I was 6'3" when I was in 8th grade, so I've been this tall, for a long time. So I can totally understand. I mean, it's gotten easier now that I've gotten older, but I can remember just being that, like, 13, 14-year-old that was like this tall. Yeah, getting all the stairs like when I, go and walk. So yeah, it can be a difficult adjustment, but by far my favorite question that I love to ask. And I mean, obviously, when it comes to clothing options, I mean, your clothing options can be very limited. I mean, I always like to say if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time. Where, I mean, if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. What have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options are limited and the fact that you basically have to have two wardrobes, your prep wardrobe and your off season wardrobe?
Yeah, it's tough for sure. A lot of stretchy materials. That's all I can say. Sweatshirts, sweatpants, leggings. I have a few pairs of jeans that are stretchy enough that I can wear them for an extended period of time. But yeah, and dresses, as long as they're sleeveless, I can wear them. They work really
You gotta
well.
you gotta show off the guns. Let's be honest. I mean, you don't want to go with a sleeve dress. I mean, that's just an insult, basically. No, yeah, and that's yeah. I mean, anyone out there, if you have anything that really helps out, I mean, we had two fashion guys come on, and I was telling them like, hey, we have bodybuilders on this show. I mean, make some clothes for them. I mean, that's $1 million idea, but they haven't yet. So definitely, I'd say get on that. But I love to ask this question for our colder climate people because being a Minnesotan myself, I mean, one of the big problems that a lot of people I think deal with, especially when it becomes winter time, and I mean, being up in Colorado, it gets very very cold as well to find that motivation to go work out. Because I mean, if it gets to be like, like 0 degrees or, like -10, where it can be, for the vast majority of January and February up here, it's hard to go out in your car and, drive to the gym. But what are some tips and tricks that you like to recommend for people, especially maybe clients that you have, on how to push past that and just be able to go to the gym when their body is just basically telling them, hey, let's just sit inside, watch a movie, and just have some, hot chocolate, basically?
Right. So my biggest thing I tell people is like always be prepared. I work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, whatever, and so I always go to the gym as soon as I leave work. If I go home, then I want to stay home. So I know that's what happens. So I don't do it. And you have to just know yourself, and you just have to say like, hey, I know that if I do this, I'm going to be tempted to do this. So I need to do it this way, and just know yourself and trust yourself and have that discipline. And it's okay to take a rest day. It's not bad. Don't beat yourself up over it. But I mean, if you have a goal, then you're going to want it more than you're going to want to not do it.
I mean, I always say, like, for me in the beginning, taking a rest day was almost like the end of the world, where I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to survive. Like, I don't know, like, what's going to happen. So, yeah, I always say it's just being able to go with the flow and just starting out small, too. Cause I mean, so many people, I think they start out so quick and then they think that, if I just work out as hard as I can, it's going to help their results faster. And then the next day they wake up and they're sore out of their mind. And then they just don't realize that, take it a little bit easy. But now we go to the questionnaire part of the podcast where I'm going to ask Kimberly here about a half a dozen or so health and fitness questions that we ask all of our guests and see how her answers stack up to everyone else that we have on the podcast. So for our first question on the questionnaire, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge at all times?
Pickles.
Pickles. Wow.
Pickles.
Even during prep?
Even during prep.
Wow. So you're one of those people. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say my dad's a huge pickle guy himself. I mean, it's just our place sometimes smells like pickles. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, that's actually the second time on this whole podcast. You're gonna be like our 265th guest. That's the second time that we've heard pickles on. So that's a very, very rare answer, but I appreciate that, getting more of the rare answers. But now, out of all of your followers that you have on Instagram, what is one thing that you think that they'd be most shocked to find out about you if they met you in person?
I Most people assume that I'm a lot bigger than I am.
How tall are you?
I'm 5'7",
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and everybody always thinks that I'm bigger, but maybe I don't know what they're compared to the normal average female. Then yes, I am bigger, but I feel like they think that I'm like this giant bodybuilder.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, yeah, especially, yeah, that's one thing that I found out a lot is that, I mean, yeah, for especially for bodybuilding, you're on the very taller side, I'd say, because a lot of them, like, they say that same thing where like, oh, I'm 5 foot taller, I'm 5'2" or something, and then people just assume that they're, like, these 6.5 foot tall, like 300 pound, just these beasts. But yeah, a lot of it is like I always said, if like I were to walk up to some of these people that I have on my show, I mean, they'd be up to maybe my stomach. I mean, some of them, just because that's just a thing that I think a lot of people don't realize. But yeah, that's one thing that we do hear a lot as well. But now, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Kimberly, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, and everyone would go along with it. What would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Ooh, that's a tough one. um, hmm.
I'll give you one that I've heard all the time that I totally sort of agree with now, because this has been our most popular one. Is that, a lot of times there can be impartial judging, and what I mean by that is, I mean, some shows, they might want more of a leaner look, and then if you were to go to a show that very next week, that those same people might want, a little bit more of a vascular look. I mean, it's always changing, and it's really hard for the competitors to sort of gauge what look they're sort of going for, unless you know the judges personally, or unless they have their history. So for first timers, that can be very, very hard, knowing, like, do I really want to get super lean for the show, or do I want to get a little bit more vascular, a little more bulky for the show? For that, that's one answer that we've heard a lot on here.
Yeah, that is true. Like, just there are judges that have the look that they prefer, which doesn't always line up quite with what the category says it's supposed to be. And so that's frustrating. But I mean, if we could change it, that'd be fantastic. But it's, I think that would probably be just to make everything more um, uniform, I guess. That would definitely help.
No, yeah, and I totally agree with that too. And just, yeah, there's just a lot of things that I think would change, but I mean, there's also so much good that the sport really does for people. But if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding career? Where would you like to be at in just your overall life? What are some goals that you would have liked to have achieved if we were to talk a year from today?
I want to be prepping for the Olympia. So that is my major goal for the next year, is to be a little bit more strategic in picking out shows. If the point system, or if I win a show, I just want to be right now next year prepping for the Olympia.
And honestly, we wish you nothing but the best of luck in that. And now, lastly, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
um, we'll give a shout out to my coach, Alan Kress, Maximum Performance Training, and he's out of Lexington, Kentucky.
All right. Well, I'll give a shout out to him. And again, I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below for everyone who's interested. But now, lastly, football season's about to get started, and knowing that, I'm a diehard Nebraska football fan, what do you think is going to happen this year? What are your expectations for the Big Red this year?
Oh gosh, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be such a, like, we have so many new
Mhm.
players. It's going to be a rough year, I think, but I feel like we have a lot of potential.
I was gonna say, and well, they have a really not, I wouldn't say easy, but they have all their tough games are at home this year too, so it should be hopefully a little bit, easy for them. But yeah, for anyone who didn't know that, I mean, even though I'm from Minnesota, I have family from Nebraska, so I mean, I'm a huge Nebraska Cornhusker fan, and let's face it, when you have the Minnesota Gophers to root for, I mean, you're gonna become someone else's favorite, because they just celebrated going to a bowl game for like the second time in the last 10 years last year, so it's nothing really to root for. But I've always said my bucket list is to go to a game in Lincoln. I mean, I've been to a game when they came here to play the Gophers, but that was the only time I've seen them. But I've always wanted to go to a game there. That's always been a big thing of mine. But again, you guys, we cannot thank Kimberly enough for coming on and sharing your journey and your story. I mean, it's just so inspiring, and I love having guests come on. One of the big reasons why I like having the bodybuilders especially come on is because a lot of times, like you said, I mean, going in public, you might get these looks, and a lot of people don't understand the hard work and the dedication that goes into this sport. And a lot of people don't realize, I mean, just normal people, just like everyone else. I mean, you may have a hell of a lot more of a dedication, and you may go to the gym a lot more, but just a normal person like everyone else. A lot of people just have this thought where, they might just be just, oh, so different because they go to the gym so much, and it's just, but it's just, they're just like everyone else. And I mean, prefer to do different things. They'd prefer to go to the gym instead of, going out and getting drunk, every weekend or stuff like that. So I'd love to have guests come on, just sort of just make people realize that, hey, they're just average, normal people just like everyone else. But again, Kimberly, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. It was great to have you on.
Yes, thank you for having me. It was fun.
Absolutely. So again, you guys, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.